Just as I was about to hit record, I choked on my own spit. Hi everyone, welcome back. So lovely to see you here, and we are continuing this format of ranking traits, be it good or bad. And today, some of you might have guessed it in the last video, we're going to be counting down my current top 10 of some weaker traits. I don't know if I want to say they're the weakest per se, but they are certainly underwhelming to me in a PvE setting for me. And as always, we might actually continue with this series because there are so many traits in Guild Wars 2, and that's why I love the build diversity and the build complexity of Guild Wars 2. Maybe just these here, I feel they haven't really been updated or brought up to speed and possibly could be in the future. You hear that? Yeah, that siren. It's coming to save these 10 traits, hopefully. Well, some of them might be, a little gone, but let's start with number 10. We have Blood Bond, which is a necromancer trait. This ability or this trait, when you hit a target that has 4 stacks of bleeding, you will cast a lesser signet of vampirism. Now this will only allow 5 hits to transfer life siphon. It is a minor trait, so it's not supposed to be super powerful, or I should say it's an adept trait. You still have to choose this. But comparing this to the 2 other trait choices that you have in this line, one that improves your res greatly, and one that allows you to move a bit faster, this one and its healing potential falls a little flat, especially because it's on a 16-second cooldown internally for this actual skill. So you're not going to get the most use out of Blood Bond at its current moment, but maybe if you're doing something solo, I could see maybe some solo play if you want a little bit more sustain for yourself. Next, we have Spiritual Resolution. This grants you resolution on use of an elite skill. Now this trait used to be called Improved Aggression, which increased the duration of your taunt, reduced the damage that you took from taunt, and I think gave you another thing as well. And it was super thematic for the Revenant, especially with Jalis, and I really loved that. For PvP and World vs. World though, taunt could just more logically be flipped into slow, because it can be a very worrying condition when in competitive modes. But for PvE circumstances, it was great. It was really cool. And then they just took that all away, and it's not really that exciting. It's 6 seconds, but it's a 10-second cooldown. So if you have a lot of concentration, sure, you can have permanent resolution uptime if you want to, but it's not my favorite. It's a little boring. Next, we have Warden's Feedback. Now this allows your focus skills to act as a missile reflection, so it will reflect projectile attacks. The problem is with focus, your 4th ability, the Curtain, it gives you swiftness, which is useful, but oftentimes mesmers will collapse the rift to pull enemies into it, because that break bar and that pull is really useful. It was maybe interesting design perhaps for World versus World, but when it comes to PvE, and I would even imagine PvP as well, there are better skills on Mesmer to take and better options to take that increase your chance of blocking or reflecting projectiles. I wouldn't really take Warden's Feedback. Next up, we have Armored Attack. This is a warrior trait which grants you 10% increased power based on your toughness. Now this is on the list because there are 2 other traits that give you 10% power based on your toughness. However, those traits have a second option added to them as well. One of them will allow you to immobilize a target or apply bleeding, and there's just a little bit more to those traits. But when you're looking at the warrior trait option, it's the same exact stat transfer of 10%, with no added benefit, with nothing else attached to it. I like this idea, but if it was like 15 or 20%, that would make a bit more sense because you're not getting anything else out of this trait. Next up, we have Protected Phantasms. This is for the Mesmer, which allows your phantasms to spawn in with Aegis. Now, not a huge fan of this because it's just a little lackluster. If your phantasm does get struck with an attack, it'll just block that attack for that one attack. But if you're fighting an enemy that has multiple attacks or multiple enemies that are all striking at the same time, you're only going to be able to block one of those attacks. I think it would probably be better if instead of Aegis, Phantasm spawned with Protection and something else. It just is a little bare bones. Now, it's only interesting if you pair this with another trait in the illusions line, which means when a phantasm transforms into a clone, it transfers the boons that it had onto you, which is something. It's something to play around with. However, if your phantasm gets struck, that Aegis is gone, so it's a little bit more difficult to actually have control over. Next up, we have our 5th spot in this list, which is Protective Ward, which is a Ranger Grandmaster, I believe in Nature Magic. It's Nature Magic. And I know why it's Nature Magic, because it competes with with 2 other Grandmaster traits that are, in my opinion, worlds better. So what this trait does is that when you are struck by an attack, you will pulse a packet of weakness out around you and grant yourself protection. However, this is on like a 10 or 15 second cooldown and is a little basic because the weakness can be stripped off, your protection could be corrupted or stripped off. I don't know, Protective Warden feels like it could really use a facelift. It just isn't really competitive with the other 2, especially because if you're wanting something that is a bit more defensive, going for the bottom Grandmaster in Nature Magic, which allows your beast, your pet attack, to heal yourself and allies, is probably good, and maybe even a little bit better, because you're getting another on-demand heal. Or if you're being a bit more supportive, the next trait to compete with Protective Warden would be Nature's Vengeance, which we know now as the trait that allows your spirits to grant alacrity, which is, I think, really good. So Protective Warden, it's not giving Grandmaster. It's not super competitive. This, to me, feels more like an adept trait at this point in Guild Wars 2's balance. We have the 4th slot. Now, this one is a little bit more of a PvE-centered ranking, and it's one that I'm just a little not impressed with, and that is Celestial Shadow. When you exit, or also this is for Druid, when you exit your Celestial avatar as a Druid, you will grant stealth and super speed to allies around you. Stealth doesn't really make sense. I don't know, I feel like there could be something better for Celestial Shadow. It could have been maybe super speed and resistance to then really ensure that you're moving and you're getting somewhere. However, this also competes with the bottom trait, have reduced duration of movement impairing conditions, and you run faster. So they're kind of doing the same thing if you did change it to resistance and super speed, and they're both kind of like escape traits. I would actually just like to see Celestial Shadow be updated to something maybe better or something slightly different. For PvE, Celestial Shadow isn't something that I really go towards, and even for PvP, I would probably go with like Natural Stride, I believe it's called, which increases your movement speed and reduces the duration of movement impairing conditions. So yeah, Celestial Shadow I feel like has kind of fallen off a little bit. Now 3rd, we have Strength of the Fallen, which is a Guardian, I believe, Valor trait. Essentially, you lose one condition every 10 seconds, and your health degenerates 33% slower when you are downed. That 33%, and especially a trait that interacts with your down state, is very old design for Guild Wars 2. I feel like a lot of those traits that used to interact with the down state got pruned out and were updated to more modern systems. We don't really have many traits that do that anymore. And this one, Strength of the Fallen, it really does feel a little outdated and just kind of boring and banal. I would like to see this one updated to something a bit more about like tanking, especially because of the Valor line, a bit more bruisery focused, increasing toughness or taunting or slowing or, defiance damage, something with break bar. And the losing a condition every 10 seconds, I guess, is nice, but it's not really anything that I feel needs to be on this trait, considering there's so many applications of condition cleanse and the signet rework as well. So yeah, I like to say Strength of the Fallen, maybe updated. Now we've hit our top 2, and both of these are actually interacting with the dodge roll, but a little bit different. Number 2, we have Stop, Drop, and Roll for Water Elementalists. This will remove Burn and Chill on yourself and allies when you dodge roll, but it's on a 10-second cooldown. Now this trait is at the 2nd slot and it's not at the 1st slot because it does have AoE application. So I had to give it a little something, a little benefit. I was like, okay, you know what? Sure, it has an AoE application. However, this trait relies so much on the roleplay and fantasy idea, but not in a good way. It is so specific to burning and chill that you might not ever get use out of this trait in PvE, and sometimes in PvP, depending on who you're facing. Because if you don't have burning or chill and you dodge roll, you know, you're not going to do anything to yourself. Maybe an ally has it, but in PvE, chances are it's probably not going to be of any use. And in PvP, dodge rolling, 10-second cooldown, I don't know, it's not enough to lure me in when there are other traits that you can choose. So yeah, stop, drop, and roll. If this was just remove a condition when you dodge roll, or something to further enhance healing, because it is the water attunement, that could be something as well. Because there aren't many traits that you choose in water attunement that directly affect healing or single target healing or barrier application or boon uptime. So yeah, stop, drop, and roll is a little bleh to me. And next up, number 1 slot, we have Evasive Purity. For Ranger, another Ranger trait, and also in Nature Magic. Nature Magic is just, it's not getting a break today. I'm going down on Nature Magic's trait line. No, that's not what I want to say. I'm going hard at it. No, that also doesn't sound good. Anyway, I'm being very critical of Nature Magic today. But Evasive Purity essentially removes a damaging condition and a non-damaging condition on you when you dodge. And likewise, to stop, drop, and roll, it has a 10-second cooldown. This is a little bit better because it's not specifically burning and chill. It's any 2 conditions that either do damage and a condition that will inhibit your movement. So that's like cripple, chill, I imagine slow, all that stuff. So there's a little bit more application, a little bit more wide range application on Evasive Purity. However, it's just for yourself. So where stop, drop, and roll has area of effect application for multiple allies, this is just for yourself on a 10-second cooldown, which is a decent cooldown. It's a little bit boring, and I don't know. So this could be a trait where when you dodge roll, you cleanse the condition on you and multiple allies around you, or completely change it to something new, entirely new. It doesn't have to be about dodging or removing conditions. I think that's also fun to see. So those are my top 10 choices for part 1, I guess, of the top 10 weakest traits in Guild Wars 2 currently. Many of these are about dodging, or about very limited amounts of boons, or niche areas of gameplay such as the down state. And a lot of them are just kind of showing their age. And many traits have been updated recently that share these ideas about dodge rolling and removing conditions and applying boons or extending boons, and they do them so much better. So I just feel like many of these haven't really been receiving a look at in terms of an update or questioning if perhaps a change was a good idea. I'm looking at you, Spiritual Resolution. I'm looking at you. But thank you everyone for coming. Like the video if you liked it. Comment down below your thoughts about some of your weaker traits that you see in Guild Wars 2, and I know there are so many more, so we'll probably have to make a part 2 for this, as well as making a part 2 for the top 10 strongest traits, so be on the lookout for those. If you'd like to support the channel, head on down to the Patreon, get early access to videos, and some exclusive Discord channels. If you would like to purchase Guild Wars 2's expansions, or try it for free, I also have links in the description. Thank you all so much for coming, and I'll see you later. Bye everyone!